To start us off, my name is Sarah. I am a researcher currently studying a doctorate in Dublin in child psychology. And I met Steph and Kaile and Matteo, who isn't here today, and Saskia. Who is Saskia? Oh, she's down the door. In London about 4 years ago, where he studied the psychology of arts, neuroaesthetics and creativity. And there's some pank people here as well, which is great to see, from Goldsmiths. And so we had this vision and we had this kind of inspiration that we wanted to keep the research going in our own kind of environments, in our own spaces. So we co-founded the Creativity Research Network as a way to bridge the gap between arts and sciences. So that's why we're here today. And then we collaborated with Oliver at Creative Empirical, who is also trying to, I suppose, focus on creative practitioners and how they're experiencing and how we can use research to support creative practitioners in their work. Have I got that, Oliver?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, well, Oliver will talk more about that later.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's make sure I've got everything down here. We're going to get into the bios. Okay, so this is a bit of admin, and I was kind of like, when I was going through this earlier, I was like, I'm a bit awestruck of the 6 people I have in front of me. It's like super inspiring. I'm even getting nervous now thinking about it. Like, okay, we have to go through these amazing bios. It's really awesome to have the 6 people here in front of us who are researchers and artists, but a lot of the researchers as well come from arts backgrounds, and then obviously our artists are super interested in research. We're getting enthusiastic nods. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, first up we have Goya Gumbani, who is a musician, songwriter, DJ and model, and is one of the most exciting new voices in the UK. Yeah, he has spent the last 10 years perfecting and mastering his craft for music, having firmly established himself as a jazz rap artist and DJ with roots in the West Indies. His musical journey took off in 2020 after releasing a series of collaborative EPs drawing inspiration from his Brooklyn upbringing. His love for hip-hop and jazz has expanded and evolved through his years spent in the UK to a rich mix of soulful house, garage and funky. It's very hard to put Goya in a box, which is the reason why we have him here today. The perfect panelist. Next we have Simon, who is a prominent lead creature artist in the film industry. Now this is kind of like a new area for me. So when I started advertising it, my brother was like, Sarah, this is super cool. And I was like, okay, this is really, really cool. And I started investigating and I saw the work that Simon does. His expertise lies in creating highly detailed and realistic creature designs for blockbuster films such as Doom Part 2 and Prehistoric Planet. And the list goes on there, and we'd probably be here all night, so I've put it there, Simon, if that's okay. And Simon's also internationally recognised for his knowledge of evolutionary biology and often integrates natural science principles into his creature designs, aiming for realism by drawing inspiration from nature. Yeah. Woo! Go Simon! Sorry, yeah, clicks, that's great. Lara is a multidisciplinary creative practitioner and educator. She has a diverse background combining large-scale strategic projects, expertise in the arts, design and cultural institutions, utilising collaborative and speculative methodologies. Her work interrogates emerging social and environmental challenges through dialogues of evolution, intelligence and languages of the environment. And Lara has exhibited internationally, including the Tate Modern, Paris Fashion Week, and Vogue Italia, and again the list goes on, so I cut it. Last year, Lara participated in the Arctic Circle Residency 2023, among many other exhibits. Well done, Lara. Okay, thank you. Clicks again, clicks. Okay, and on to our fabulous scientists and researchers. So Kaile Smith is a doctoral researcher in cognitive psychology at the Graduate Center in New York, and has a BFA from Parsons School of Design. Her research explores the relationships between creativity, feeling inspired, and well-being in highly creative individuals. And she is a research consultant for the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. She has also worked as a creative director and designer for over a decade and runs a small creative studio, Minime Creative. Oliver Durkin researches the cognitive and neurophysiological correlates of flow states, specifically as they occur in creative contexts. This research follows a 10-year career as a painter and installation artist and curating dozens of exhibitions around Europe. He is studying his PhD at Goldsmiths, where he is also an associate lecturer. And Stephanie is a doctoral researcher at the Artist Lab at the University of Vienna. Her research investigates the emotional and phenomenal experiences museum visitors have with visual artworks. While she's been working in museum studies for the last few years, her primary artistic background is in theatre and performance, and she hopes to bring her research back there soon. Clicks. So, folks, you can kind of understand how I was like, whoa, we have such a panelist here this evening. So I think it's safe to say that we are in safe hands as we discuss creativity, research, the science of creativity, and more. So then for you, how the flow of the evening is going to go. We're going to discuss different aspects of the research from a research perspective and from a creative artistic perspective. And we'll move along through the different panelists, and it's very much a conversational style. We kind of want it to be creative, we want to see what emerges. So you all just relax and enjoy the evening. You all, if you have questions you'd like to ask, we have specific time at the end of the evening. And if there's links, if there's something that sparks interest, that's inspiring, just keep it in your hearts and wait till the end and we can ask all those questions. Okay, so we're going to start off. Are we ready to start? Yeah?
I'm ready.
Oliver's ready. Yeah, we're all ready. Okay, great. Simon, I'm gonna ask you this question first. What is the first step you take in starting a new creative project? This is going to be the first. What is it? Oh, the mic. And I will talk about it. Yeah, there is a mic. Is the other mic working? Oh, you have it. Perfect. There you go.
Cheers.
Yeah.
So yeah, the beginning of a creative project, I would probably, well, yeah, it depends a lot on the project, but I mean, I obviously design like creatures and monsters and things like this. So I would probably first kind of like stick on a lot of like nature documentaries and stuff. Generally, the whole time I'm working, I'll always have videos on one of my screens. Yeah, generally you can start off with like your references and like your idea of like what you want to do, and you know, one can come before the other. It doesn't really matter which, but kind of, I would definitely look at a lot of nature. I tend to not look at other artists' work because that can really like influence you a lot. I think, you know, nature is kind of the source of where it all comes from in the first place anyway. You want to be looking at things that haven't been like regurgitated through someone's mind already. Go right to like, you know, where everything comes from. And yeah, and then maybe you want to start out with a few like loose sketches and stuff. A lot I'd be kind of like a lot in the end I go into a lot of 3D digital sculpting, stuff like this, but at the beginning maybe just like very loose gestural drawings and things like this. Kind of like you might have an idea in your head and you're searching through this kind of fog to kind of like bring it to life. You're not trying to do like good drawings, you're just trying to like put on a page like what you have. It might be a very loose sketch and it might be there and I'm like, okay, that's my thing that I want to do, and then I can just go straight to 3D and start sculpting that. But really I'd say, yeah, the main thing is just kind of getting that kind of dopamine rolling of getting excited about like creatures, animals, whatever. Like say even something as simple as maybe it's less design, I might just make an animal for a film occasionally, and just say I have to make a bear, just stick on some bear documentaries and be like, oh, those are like fucking awesome, like that's pretty cool. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but whoops. It's good. Okay, cool. But yeah, I mean pretty much that. I mean it's kind of I don't really have a strict routine, I just kind of would go with the flow really.
Yeah, great. Would anyone else like to jump in?
You guys?
Oh god, okay. Just a kind of quick one. I guess because mine is less finite, because it doesn't. I might be working across a couple of disciplines, so I might start with material first, and it might be that I'm kind of exploring. If I'm exploring like a sculpture, for instance, I'll start looking at the environment and how I need things to coexist in an environment because it has to be so interrelated. So if I'm using a building, I would start looking at the building materials that are confined within the building. and how they function as a human body, essentially, as the building does. Obviously there's pipes, there's flow, I need to kind of investigate that, and then I start to kind of pull from there. So that might be a sculptural approach. It might be as simple as just like having a small panic attack in my garden and just like, you know, trying to pick leaves and then starting to make things from them. It really, yeah, I think because I'm more of a multidisciplinary and like fine artist in that part of my practice, it's so intuition driven, so it can be anything.
What about you?
You're up.
What's the question?
Your creation process.
How do you get started?
For real, I tend to just look for inspiration in like anything. Honestly, I feel like 9 times out of 10 it kind of just finds me. So the way I kind of started is not by actually pressuring myself to start something. It's more just like, where am I? How do I feel? And then I kind of just build it off like that. It's kind of how I would start.
It's working.
Katie, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was curious maybe to probe that deeper, because you mentioned in the bio that a lot of your inspiration comes from Brooklyn. I happen to live in Brooklyn, so I'd love to hear more about that.
I feel like a lot of the things I kind of like tap into are like, it's quite deep with like, I feel like to know where you're going, you gotta know where you come from. So a lot of it kind of stems from that kind of like ethos of like, just like, cause I moved away from New York when I was like in my like teens. And I feel like as you get older, you kind of look back on like, what are the things that made me the person I am today? And I feel like just looking in like that in itself is just a whole another world of like, how did I get here? How did the world begin? Is the world round? Is it flat? You know what I mean? So it's kind of just like, yeah, I feel like it's just like digging deep and just kind of just like going with the flow more than like being really like, oh, this is where we're gonna like start, or this is the beginning of it. It's just like, how do you feel? You know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm curious from any of you guys, during your creative process, do you do a lot of research in the beginning? You said it starts with a feeling. It sounds like for Simon it starts with a lot of research. How much during your process are you guys continuing to look for inspiration, or do you really get a mission and then go for it? Anyone?
I thought I was gonna like be holding the mic the least. Like starting with me. Can you say it again? Sorry.
Yeah. How much are you continually looking through for inspiration during your process?
I'm not, honestly, I feel like I'm never really looking really hard. I feel like I just submerge myself in like whatever it is I'm trying to do. And I'm not really looking, I feel like I just do things until something feels right. So I kind of just like throw myself in it, and I don't really go looking too hard. I feel like the inspiration is normally just around us. Mm-hmm. So I feel like a lot of things, like for instance, like I won't watch something, but I'll be watching something, if that makes sense. So I won't put something on specifically to be like, I'm gonna watch this, but I'll be like, it's nice to have some extra light in like the room. And then from that light, something might come from that, or it's never really like I'm really hardly looking for something. It's just like whatever's happening around me tends to be the inspiration. I feel like it's just normally always there without having to be like, I'm looking specifically for something. I feel like it just finds me. But just being open to being inspired by whatever it might be kind of tends to be a lot more freeing than being like, because I feel like when I used to like really trying to understand how to make something, I used to be like, all right, I'll put on like Samurai Jack or some shit, some like cartoon or Cartoon Network, and be like, oh my god, this means this and this means that, and then you get older, or you get a little bit further along, and you're like, wait, actually, what I thought it meant then and what I understand it to be now tends to be a different thing. So I kind of just like, I feel like, yeah, inspiration's just always around us. You don't even have to go looking for it. It's kind of just there, you know?
Yeah, I guess I'll kind of second that. I think it does find you. I think when you're in the process, I find that, because also if I'm doing like photography, the whole point is that you're supposed to be looking. But actually it's the things that are the most out of focus that are the things that I'm the most interested in. And so I find, I think the way that you kind of, when you start a project, you have to just be incredibly open to the chance and to kind of the happenstance instead of considering what you actually, at least for me, considering what I want it to look like or how I want it to be received. I have to be open to what the stories are or what the narratives could potentially be, or the things that I'm not hearing because I'm not ready to or because I don't have enough knowledge. And that might change throughout the process of it, but if I'm doing something that's like an environmental work, there's so many stories that I don't know and that I haven't heard, and you kind of just need to continue to receive the information and capture it in a way that you feel could potentially make sense to you at some point in life, but it just finds you, it really does. I think when you just actually even kind of when you just acknowledge everything that you're doing in life, like everything is finding you constantly wherever you're supposed to be at any point. And it's the same thing with creative direction, from my perspective.
Yeah, no time is of the essence. I'll be quick, but I'll say I agree with these two, and I'm kind of the stuff is just so interesting. There's interesting stuff like everywhere, and I'm not really researching it because I want to research. It's just like you go into a chain of like, this is really interesting, and you just keep searching for it. So I agree, like inspiration is all around you. You just need to look for it.
One of the things that as I'm listening to this, I find everything that they're saying more interesting than anything that I have to say from a scientific perspective. But I do study inspiration, and I've done a few different studies looking at people's firsthand experiences of inspiration across 30 different countries and how they describe inspiration. And we've found that there's specific profiles that people happen to fall into, and we have a few of them that they've just discussed. And so I would say Goya falls into what I call inspired living. It's people who live and breathe. It doesn't matter. It could be the dewdrops on the windowsill. It could be these couches. It could be anything at any time. And they never actually have to search for it. It just hits them all the time. These are people who are really high in openness, and a lot of the creative process comes really naturally to them. I feel like Laura's was a little, you all have a bit of that flavor, but Laura spoke a lot about feeling like a signal that has like reached her, that it was from something that you're just picking up and you're just there to receive it. You need to be open. This is another type of inspiration. These people tend to seek out inspiration less directly and are more of receivers that just suddenly something hits them and then they're off to the races. And the version that you're talking about are people who are more stimulated by visual input and different types of things that they're seeing and then incorporating that into their work. Some other types that weren't discussed that probably fall sometimes into less creative people are spiritual, more religious, and sort of more mystical experiences with inspiration. There's also people who feel like they basically don't understand inspiration and they never find it. And since you guys are all here for a talk on these topics, you're probably very high in openness and you probably are somewhat not that category. But if you are, you're not alone. There's lots of those out there. There's also the most common type of inspiration that people describe is called introspective inspiration, and it's really not actually looking at outside catalysts for your inspiration. It's just taking time to yourself and thinking about what's most important to you and digesting what it is you're trying to achieve, and then taking that forward with you through the process.
Can I jump in and ask this one question, Kaile? What motivated you to study inspiration?
I think I fall into Goya's category where I'm just dazzled by everything all the time, and I find it hard to imagine that some people aren't, and I want to understand that. But I also study creativity and well-being, and there's a lot of well-being benefits of experiencing inspiration, and so that was a really key relationship between creativity, inspiration, and well-being.
So from the research, have you come across a way to support inspiration, or to increase it, or to access it?
I think it's exactly what they've been saying. It's being open. It's looking at not typical things that you don't always look at, being open to different categories. Maybe if you're a musician or an artist, not looking at music and art, like you're saying, looking at nature, so you're not biased by the things that you're seeing. It's really about being open to the world around you.
Can I?
Yeah, you jump in.
I think this is sort of the difference between the sort of skills that people that have to engage in creative disciplines on a daily basis have, that people that don't have creative disciplines, or the sort of skills that they need to have to do what they do well. So, for example, maybe a simple distinction is people that need to work on things that have a predictable outcome, and the people that have to work on things that don't have a predictable outcome, you need to like look inwards in order to find direction. Okay, and people that have more, say jobs, this is a real stereotype, but say like an office job, I'm sure there's probably people with office jobs here, but you might not need to use creative skills as much as, say like a musician, right? It's a different type of skill, and I think this is something that I see creativity research, which is an emerging area, as highlighting as unique skills which actually could be transferable to help other people, especially if they come not just to produce better outcomes, but especially for like the well-being benefits that you talk about as well. So I think what we're tapping into is something that is a really like interesting and growing area of research that you guys are giving kind of lived examples of, and I think a lot of artists relate to you, but it's just not really been crystallized yet properly, but I think it will be. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else like to jump in based on those?
Do we have 1 second? I would ask one question.
Yeah, go for it.
So I do not research creativity or inspiration, but I am constantly having to do kind of creative in research stuff. We're always having to like write things, or produce a paper even when we don't necessarily want to. So I'm wondering if any of you have thoughts on how you work, or if you ever have to produce something even when you're not feeling inspired, and what makes, if that's somehow a worse thing eventually that it comes out of it, or what differences in your process you feel when you do or don't feel inspired to be creating the thing that you're currently in the process of creating.
You kind of have to become your own personal fluffer. That's like the best way I can explain it. At least for me, whenever there's something that, there's a difference between kind of like paid work and personal work. And for me, at the very least, the way, if I'm working on something that I know is not necessarily the most like idyllic project, it's something that takes a little bit, I have to find the angle, the narrative. I have to give myself like a story and a connection and a motive context that I will be able to empathize with, or be able to relate to something in my own life, to be able to give a motivation to it, and then also surround myself with other people who I'm bouncing off of, because I really struggle, personally, if I'm creating something that I'm not motivated by. I need external energy to help me focus on them. I don't know if either of you
Yeah, I mean, I work on a wide range of projects. Some I'll be like super interested in, and sometimes like less. And obviously, I don't really have a choice. I suppose I'm more like, you guys are more doing your own stuff, whereas I do my own stuff as well. But I'm also working for like companies or things. There's deadlines. I don't have a choice. I need to do it. So like, yeah. So like, I kind of think, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I kind of sometimes think. I think I kind of developed this thought process like at uni and stuff, because sometimes you have projects you're not really interested in, but I kind of think of it along the lines of like, some people like certain foods, or like you might like hate apples, and like another person is like literally their favorite food. So I just kind of approach it like, what am I missing? Like, someone loves this thing, it's literally their favorite thing in the world. I don't like it, so like I'm missing something that they're seeing. Just try to figure out like, what is it that they're seeing in this that I'm not, and at least that will get you like through it. But yeah, I mean, I think everything can be interesting. If you try hard enough, you can find things in it, Or maybe speak to someone who loves it, and you can absorb some of that.
Grin and bear it, think of England.
I've been doing this job for the last 4 days and I've completely hated, like, the whole process of it. But I feel like there's a comfort that comes from being uncomfortable and getting over that. And I feel like it's kind of just like growing pains, you know, like just doing things you might not necessarily like doing, but I feel like for the greater cause, it kind of just, I don't know, it teaches you a little bit about something that maybe you didn't know about, or something that you might not have been interested because you just might not have, you know. There's like a part of everything that I feel like you can connect with. And sometimes it's the part that you might not understand that you don't connect with, but I feel like there's a part in there that is for you. So yeah, I feel like, yeah, you just gotta push through it, and on the other side you'll get good results, you know?
Thank you so much. I have lots of now ideas. I'm like, I need to be more aware when I go out into the world. I'm going to be walking down those London streets being like... that kind of segues nicely onto your creative process. So I might direct this question to Lara, maybe. Like, you know, where is it an intuitive thing when you kind of work through your creative process, or is it really intentional? We're just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. Yeah, take your time. We all good? We're good tech-wise? Yeah, we're all safe. Lara, do you want me to repeat that?
Process, intuitive versus...
Yeah, just like your creative process. You know, how does that manifest itself for you? Is it like more intuitive, or is it more like directed? Do you have like a specific technique? Yeah, do you get it? Yeah. I know it's going to change, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
What we want to know.
I think, because I think also, I get the luxury of being in a multidisciplinary practice, so it is intuitive by nature. So if I'm working on a project, usually I try to, if I can immerse myself. I have the luxury, obviously, of going to the Arctic and immersing myself in that, and that has a lot of boundaries because you only have a certain amount of kit that you can have with you. It's extremely cold, and that kit needs to function. So good luck. And so a lot of that was, it just became a really intuitive process. I thought I had an idea of what I was going to do when I got there, and then it very quickly changed to interviewing people, taking sound, sound captures of not only ice floe, but also like animals in the region, birds that were colonizing at that specific point. It just became this complete like sensory overload. And I think I've learned over the past few years, my process is essentially like immersion to a certain point, and then complete kind of sensory overload, and then I start kind of piecing that almost in like a computational manner. And so it's like this massive abundance, and then it slowly starts to get editorialized. And that's across all the mediums that I work in.
I asked, like, what's the question? There's so many words. With words I get fucked up.
No, not at all. Creative process. So how do you know, when you might be inspired, I know you said about you're more inspired by the environment and just being, but then when you have to like produce a piece of work, what does that look like for you? Do you have like a technique that you have to follow?
Nah, I feel like my thing is more like going against technique and reinventing technique every time. I feel I'm more like loose with it. I'm never really like overly critique over how or the process I might take to get to where I'm trying to get to. I just believe that I kind of just let it flow. I just like let it come and not like, I'm not too precious about it, is how I would kind of answer that.
I guess I'd say like at the beginning of a project, you're very loose and fluid when you're coming up with lots of ideas. Later on in a project where you might be more focusing on refining an idea, it's more structured. So I guess, it really varies from project to project or which stage of the project you're in. So think that's about it.
Yeah, I guess this is my turn now because I do flow research, which is all about the process. And I think one of the things that I'm trying to uncover, and I haven't got the answer yet, to full disclosure, is there a different type of flow experience? Wait, let me just describe what flow is first. So flow is a feeling where you feel completely absorbed in what you're doing, and you get so absorbed that actually your actions start to feel almost like they're happening automatically. It's this kind of effortless feeling. And as a result, that feels really rewarding. And afterwards, usually you feel this boost in motivation and well-being, and you also want to come back to it. Now, this isn't always good. This also leads to problems with addiction. It's also implied in gambling, doom scrolling on social media. But also, a lot of artists and creatives talk about this, but also lots of sports people. So it's pretty much you can achieve it in any domain. The thing that I'm trying to understand is when you don't really know what the outcome is, do you experience the same sort of flow that you get when you know exactly what the outcome is? And Simon, what you just said was that towards the end of the process, you've kind of got an idea of where you're going. You can probably visualise a bit more, what it's going to look like, or at least you're aiming for something that's less abstract than when you started. So my question, I guess, would be, do you feel like you experience more flow at that sort of early stage where it's just anything goes, where it's much looser, or towards the end, and maybe to Goya as well? Like, I don't know whether there's a distinction between, okay, I'm towards the end of the track now, and I'm pretty much, there's not much wiggle room now before it finishes compared to when you started. So yeah, that would be my, and same to you as well, Lara, but yeah, that would be my question to you guys.
Yeah, I think you experience in different ways at different points of a project. Like, I'd say two main areas that I would experience it, like right at the beginning, where you're coming up with a lot of different concepts, a lot of different ideas, and you just kind of get lost. You're like, your brain's kind of just going off in all these different directions, and you're kind of like, this idea, and you kind of get lost in that. I'd say that's one type, maybe. And then later on, when you're refining a project, it's like a different type of more like, let's say for instance, like on like Worm from Dune or something, where you're spending potentially days like sculpting the skin of it, and you're just like lost. You do just get lost in like the wrinkles and this and then that, and like it's like a different type of flow where you will just get lost and it's just happening. And not really related to like my work, but I'd say like a place that I like kind of see flow a lot personally is like in writing. I don't really do that much writing, but it is something that comes quite naturally to me, and I think it's one of the most obvious places you can see it. Like if I begin writing, it just starts to like spill out, and you're kind of just observing it happen. Like, or even just like if someone said to me, "Where's like the letter X on the keyboard?" I'd be like, "I don't know." But like if I wanted to write the word X-ray, X.
Yeah.
So like my hand just wrote it, and like, I don't know what those buttons are. So it's just, your hands are just doing it or texting, and it's all just flowing out. So I think writing's probably one of the most basic ways, maybe one of the easiest ways to study it, is just because I find I get a lot of flow in writing. Even if I'm writing like a massive text message or something, it's just like you're just suddenly like in a deep discussion. But like sometimes I have like really deep.
These massive
Yeah. But sometimes you'll be like a deep discussion with someone about something like super interesting, and it just flows out of you, and you're literally just like kind of observing yourself write, and it's quite interesting. But yeah. But in work-wise, yeah, I'd say those are the two places that you would generally experience it.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm personally, I'm like, I'm flow all the way through. I feel like art is like, there's no real balance to it, you know what I mean? So I feel like, especially with music specifically, and like the artistry and that, I feel like, because there's no such thing as, there's not really a beginning, middle, and like end. It kind of ends when you feel like it's gonna end, and it kind of starts when you feel like it's gonna like start. So I feel like what you were saying about like just getting lost in like the flow, like it might take 8 hours to get to do what you want to do for like 2 hours, and I feel like you kind of just it's kind of rewarding in the end, kind of what you're saying. But like I feel like I just flow all the way through. And then I kind of get to that stage where I'm like, this isn't done, but I'm done with this. And I'm ready to move on to the next part. So yeah, I feel like flow is like, for me, it's really, really important. It kind of just, it kind of just feels free. It kind of feels like the most freest part of the like process. And yeah, it feels safe.
I think music specifically is like such a unique art form where
Yeah.
that occurs. But no, that's all.
No, I really love that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm a musician as well, and I played a lot of music, like mainly when I was younger. But I think it's so different from different art forms where it's really just coming out of you, and it's just like So it's a very different thing to other types of art. But yeah, you.
Yeah, I mean, not much to add, but I think because I think my state is I'll be in flow, but it will be at such an extreme abundance, and I think the kind of parallels to addiction is really helpful because I think it is. I do think it's a really interesting. It's almost like a manic state, and then it can be paired with multiple manic states simultaneously while you're working on different things. But yeah, you do get this kind of exhaustion where something just feels like it's slightly resolved or not fully resolved, but you don't need to go there, and so you can now move somewhere else. And I don't necessarily know any other way to explain it aside from that.
Yeah, I'll just add to that as well. Yeah, I think artists especially and I'm definitely like this, is like you're either completely absorbed in something or you're just like not, and you have the ability to just hyper focus onto things, and that can be like, you can be some of the most successful people in the world because you get so good at what you're doing, or like alternatively you could get obsessed with like the wrong thing, and I think it's just trying to control where that focus is going is really the key to that.
But I think that there's also, I'm going to be the devil's advocate here, and sorry if I offend anyone, but I think flow can be a really good means of escaping, and that's not always a good thing. And I think actually for some artists, they might actually use their art to escape from things they just actually need to deal with. So I do wonder, I mean, I am a workaholic. I work till 11 o'clock most nights, and I get into loads of flow. So I'm saying this from personal experience as well, because it's such a nice feeling, right? It's kind of like a drug, right? So, but my other point was Goya. Well, I am kind of jealous. You sound like you're always in flow, which is fantastic. It's called being flow prone. I have a study currently that I'm doing about flow proneness that anyone here can do, by the way. We'll put the links up later. Is there a time when you're not in flow?
When I'm not in flow, for real, I gotta really put myself to the side and be like, bro, relax. Otherwise, because I feel like I'm literally always thinking about, even now, I can hear the music outside playing, and I'm like, oh my god, 808, and oh my god, I could go home and like round off that 808 and maybe pull out some Lauren, and it's just like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like always going, which like isn't a problem until it is, I guess. But I don't know. I feel like you're kind of right. I feel like when I first started making music, it was escape. It was like escape, and it was me having a deeper conversation with myself, and that I wasn't really allowed to, just because of like society-based shit, like, oh my god, I have to go shopping, but the plumber is coming, but the electrician's also coming. It's like a whole bunch of things that I need to do, but I'm kind of like just on autopilot at all times. So like what flow then began to be was like me pulling myself away from all of the other shit going on outside of like my equilibrium or what I wanted to kind of be like sitting in or like going through. So yeah, I feel like it is definitely a form of escape that, depending on who you are, like where you are in life, it can, pros and cons, Yeah.
No, that was amazing. Thank you, Ray. I'm interested now, Goya, but I think I might know the answer. Do you have your audience in mind when you're creating? Like, do you want them to feel specific emotions? Do you ever think about that?
For real? No.
I guess that is like Lara's time. emotions of your audience? Because I guess, yeah, for Simon, your work is a little bit more audience based.
I will be a person.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, I mean, I have to. It depends because I do work that's for me and I do work that's for a job. And if it's for a job, I am thinking about like audience expectations and things. But there's a lot of people who do that as well. You know, I'm creating the creature, whatever it is, and you know, you have people, you know, making it move, or people who've written the narrative, etc. So, you know, if I'm trying to sell a concept, I'll definitely go and kind of like put it into like an emotionally expressive type thing. But if I'm doing my own personal work, I'm not really. I think it can be negative to think about the audience too much. I'm doing it because like I'm super interested in something. I think this could be awesome, and like I'm doing it for me because I like it. And then yeah, you can post it online, and like, you know, it feels good if, you know, it gets shared, and there's hundreds of thousands of people like it, and that's cool. But like that's not. I think it's also with social media and everything, it's a trap you can fall into. Where I have friends and stuff, and I think people, you know, you fall in and out of it, but chasing this like dopamine high of like. Then they start to make work in order to get tons of likes, and you're doing it like then for the wrong reason. I think, yeah. And if I'm doing personal work, I'm not really thinking about audience, or at least trying very hard not to think about audience expectations, and doing it because of my own personal interests or ideas. Whereas for a job, you do need to think of it to some extent.
Simon, can you quickly tell the story about where like you had to basically change like the certain shape of a creature because the producers were arguing about it back and forth for weeks?
Yeah.
I think I remember like a few like sounded like quite ridiculous stories.
I mean, yeah, I mean that's what happens in production, and everyone wants a piece of the pie, and everyone wants to have their. I mean, for example, I mean many, but like in Godzilla, King of Monsters, there's this big three-headed dragon named Ghidorah, and I was working on like the heads of it and how they look, and you have to please like the people who. You have to make this Sony. Was it Sony? I think it was Sony. They're looking for one thing, and then you have producers wanting another thing. Then you have like the people who actually own the IP in Japan who want maybe a completely opposite thing, and then you've got someone else. So you have to kind of balance all these different opinions and ideas and stuff. So yeah, you know, it depends. Some projects are super fluid, and there's not that many people putting their hands in. Other times. There's a lot of people putting their hands in, and it's not something you know you need to not get frustrated with those things. It's just what your job is, and you need to try and kind of like tread that ground and try and make them all happy at the same time. It's just something that just occurs, I guess, that you have to do.
Yeah, I wonder, Goya and Lara was on. If you guys also have thoughts on if you're thinking about the response that your audiences or potential audiences are going to have when they're listening to music or seeing your photographs or sculptures. Does this occur to you? Is this something that is part of your process, or does it kind of pop in later?
So Steph focuses on emotions research. So that's we got Steph and expert.
Yes, so we've moved away from creativity and now to the receptive aesthetics of audiences.
I think when it comes to my own work, no is the answer. But when I've worked on exhibitions, yes, and there's a lot of audience research that goes into it. So I was working on kind of the David Cronenberg exhibition, or the Kubrick exhibition, and there was so much kind of research going in there about how the community in Toronto was actually going to be consuming that. How you have the physical experience from a child's perspective versus an adult's perspective, and then also, especially Kubrick, because you're dealing with really specific content that can be quite triggering to specific populations as well. It was also making sure that we were doing like harm prevention and things like that. So I definitely don't necessarily think that I'm that considered or thoughtful in my own practice. But for professional things, it's kind of like a mandatory part of exhibition design, and when you're thinking about bringing together artworks that are really profound, but also speaking to specific political moments in society, you have to be really sensitive.
I feel like nothing could be wrong. I feel like when it comes to art and like just the creation of like something, I feel like what kind of connects all of us, and it is the human connection. So I feel like I don't really think about the audience as such, but I know that everybody might not connect, but some people will connect, and I feel like it might not necessarily be on how I perceive the art, but it might just be how you perceive the art. So I feel like it's really open to interpretation, and I kind of just leave it there. And it's not really like I'm trying to target this or that kind of person. It's more a thing where it's just like, I'm just expressing, and we as people all express. We all have our different mediums. Some's music, some's food, some's film. And I feel like the thing with like music and sound is that it's literally around us at all times. So I feel like there's just a connection in that. Like I might put a police siren in a part of a song, and everybody from the city will know what a police siren sounds like because they live in the city, you know what I mean? And that might be that connection. Whereas it might not connect as much with somebody that is in the countryside and they that might not hear sirens on a regular basis, or a New York siren specifically, like in Brooklyn, like someone might connect with that because like, oh shit, I know what this is. Like I spoke to Ali today, and Ali said his friend is from Trinidad, and in one of my EPs, my uncle speaking who's from Guyana, which is right next to Trinidad, and his friend was able to connect with that, and he was like, yo, I recognize that like dialect. And I'm like, oh shit, this is like my uncle from Guyana who doesn't even know, like he's speaking about being in a taxi, and what felt like nothing to him at the time connected with someone from Trinidad that was in London. And so, you know what I mean? It's like, it's just like a beauty in the connection where it's like, it's not intended for the listener per se, but I know that there's going to be a humane connection between someone and this thing.
Thank you, Goya.
That's amazing.
Steph.
That's such an incredible story, and I don't want to dip away from that, but I want to go back to something that Lara said about the difference between your own personal work and curating an exhibition with the works from someone else. One of the practices, so I've like mentioned, I study emotions that people have in response to artworks in museum settings. And so one of the things we do most often is we walk into a museum and we talk to visitors who are spontaneously there, and we say, hey, go look at that artwork, come back and fill out our survey, tell us what emotions you felt and how strongly you felt them. And so one thing that my lab has taken to doing is when we have access to the artists, especially when they're contemporary artists who we can talk to, or the curators who have been generous enough to connect us with, is we'll ask the artist to fill out the same survey and say, the ideal visitor, how would they fill out this survey? Normally they look at us like we have 10 heads and they're like, what are you talking about, the ideal visitor? That's bullshit, and they don't like it either. But in one particular study that actually happened before I joined the lab, is they had the artist and who was willing to do this and was like, I don't really like it, but I'll play along. And the curators do the same thing. And the curators' responses were actually a better match for the audience's responses than the artists'. Like predictions of what the audiences might be feeling. So this idea of the curators compared to the artist is really interesting to me. I don't necessarily know if that's going towards a question. I just wanted to pull that tie in.
No, it absolutely is.
Which was just very, very fascinating. Also, a fun anecdote on this one is last year we had the opportunity to collect some data at the Doge's Palace in Venice, where Ensam Kiefer was exhibiting this contemporary exhibition, and we asked him, somehow we got access to him and to fill out the survey, and he basically told us to fuck off. He was like, no, and he sent us back like 3-paragraph response to something. He was like, I'm not touching this. No, absolutely not. I don't, more what you're saying, Goya, is like, people are going to take what they're going to take from it, and I don't want to prescribe anything to that or assume what people are going to take from it. They're going to put on this what they will, and they're going to take from it what they will, and we'll leave it at that. So I guess trying to formulate these general thoughts into a question now.
I can make a comment.
Yeah, absolutely. If not, that gives me time to think of a question.
I can kind of speak to it. I think because like the interesting thing about my practice is that I'm kind of split between two people. So I have kind of a practice where I have to think about everyone else first, and I have to consider how a group of artists is going to be functional their works are going to be functional, and I have to make sure that I'm supporting advocacy of their voices, or for instance for the Arctic, as I'm doing that, I have to make sure that there's representation from Arctic communities, and that there's Inuit communities that are actually speaking for themselves, and that I'm not appropriating those voices. So that's one split of my brain, but then for my own personal practice, I'm kind of an asshole. And I really I can't care that much. And I think it's a really challenging thing, and it's two very different mind frames, and they don't always work together. And I have to be in a very different state to function on those levels. So I think it's just an interesting thing. Curatorial practice is an act of care, or it should be. And it's a considered practice, whereas art practice is a little bit more inwards. Personally, that's what I find. So I don't know if there's a question.
You had something.
No, I just relate. I mean, because I was an artist for 10 years before, so I made work for myself, and I also did commission-based work. And I found, and one of the things I'm interested in the well-being outcomes that come from post-making art, or the well-being outcomes with that. And I found that I used to actually just get really poor well-being from doing commissioned work, because there was so much like external pressure, whereas when it was for myself and I wasn't thinking about the audience, that's when I started to get the well-being benefits. So I think like I used to turn my nose up to the idea of like a hobby artist, but actually I like totally respect them now. Like it's like, yeah, you should do it for yourself, like, and as soon as you start entering into the world where other people become part of the ingredients, it gets messy, and you need to make sure, like Goya, you're a good example of like that you can shut that out, because it can really easily influence and maybe kind of ruin the process. To be honest with you, I think it kind of ruined it for me. Yeah, that, if I'm really honest, like that was one of the things that ruined painting for me. I started painting because I absolutely loved the process. I was like 16 with him in like a small cupboard in a school. Like that was like me at my best. And then 10 years later, and I have to think about clients, and it just kind of ruined it. So yeah, I think the ability to manage that is very important as a creative.
It's crazy because we were having a convo.
Do you want to respond to that? Because I know also Kaile does amazing research on creativity and well-being. Do you want to jump in? And then Goya?
Yeah, I was just going to say, sorry. I thought of this earlier when you guys were talking about flow and it feeling like an addictive state, and then hearing this as well. So in a lot of my research that's not always on inspiration, it's looking at emotions and well-being during the creative process and comparing it in highly creative people, which are usually creative professionals, very extreme hobbyists, compared to more general population, people who are a little bit of hobbies sometimes, but they don't consider themselves creative in any particular way. And one of the really interesting findings that I'm still trying to understand, that I feel like I'm getting insight from this conversation, is that in general populations, if you are creative today, your well-being tomorrow goes up remarkably. You're going to have more positive emotions and less negative emotions. But if you're highly creative, which is mostly professional creatives, you actually have a creative hangover the next day where your well-being dips, your negative emotions increase, and your positive emotions decrease. They come back, but it's been replicated a lot in studies, this well-being benefit in creativity that gets touted a lot. And so I was very intrigued when in my highly specialized populations it was creative hangovers, and I feel like I'm getting some insight into that from hearing you guys' stories.
Thanks, Katie. Wait, do you want to jump in then? Or is the moment gone? I know you're in flow state all the time. All the time you're in it. Do you want to jump in?
I totally forgot.
That is totally fair, sorry. Yeah, that's totally fair. Anyone else want to respond to that? I'm so intrigued. Well-being, how do you feel? Do you get the creative hangover, Lara? Do you have a question? It's coming back. I'll come back to you, Lara.
No, allow me to go first, please.
Oh my God, we're all dying to know.
We are dying to know.
Yeah, I feel like there's a thing with like creating where like it does get a little bit fatiguing, like having to think about like how everyone else is gonna respond to your like art. But I do feel like when you originally start making art, none of those things matter. It only becomes a thing that matters like once it kind of gets to a certain level. And there is a lot of people that are like, oh, I really like the shit that you just put out, or whatever, right? But no, I feel like we were having a convo earlier, and we were speaking about just like children, and how like watching a child do something that they love doing, there's no care in the world, and it kind of just reminds you of like why you actually do it, and it kind of just removes the restraints of like society and like social media and like how fast am I developing as an artist, when it's just should be about the love that you have for the art and just like exploring how you grow as a person within that. So I feel like, yeah, sometimes it's about like holding back into that, and that kind of just like, I don't know, kind of removes that feeling of like, I don't know, like uncertainty, or like what's next, or what's to come, or whatever, you know?
Sure, I think so. Yeah, I think it's kind of like a skill as well to be able to like, I mean, obviously I have to deal with like criticism and feedback all the time, every day. So I think it's like, I think I'm pretty good at emotionally detaching from things. I think it's just a necessary part. You can't, I mean, it's a balance. You want to be passionate enough about something to be like excited about it and do a good job, but you're going to have people, you know, telling you they do like this or they don't like this. So like, I think there's, you know, you can train yourself to kind of detach from those emotions and just purely logically do like, I need to do this, I need to do this. I think it's just finding that balance between being like a lizard with no feelings and being like too into something where you care so much that it's gonna like hurt you. Like I do see people in the industry where like they'll be asked to change something by a director and they're so passionate about it and they really just want it to look like this, and it's like they're so upset and they start to like lash out a bit, and it's like, dude, you just need to just do it. Like, this is your job, that they've paid for this. Like, you know, you can express yourself in your personal work and stuff, like we have total creative freedom. So I think it's this balance between, you know, being too emotional and being not emotional at all, and it's kind of training yourself to find that right balance, I think, is the key.
Okay, thank you so much.